Realize that you are not craving what you're actually buying.
You're listening to the Dare to Be Different podcast, a podcast for people who want to live an extraordinary life. On this week's episode, Joe and Ed talk about how you do not need to spend any more money on things you don't need this Black Friday. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Dare to Be Different podcast, special Black Friday edition. My co-host Ed Newell is here with me today. How are you?
I love Black Friday.
Do you really?
It's amazing.
I hate Black Friday.
Why?
With a passion.
Oh my gosh, so many deals.
Well, we're going to talk about that today, but I don't like it. I don't like crowds. I don't like the, and on top of it, I for most big purchases, because it seems like people go out on Black Friday for big purchases. Like that's like,
right.
I need a new TV.
If I need a new TV, that's the day to get it.
Right.
Yeah.
I research everything that I buy, especially big purchases, so much that I don't necessarily like the, oh my goodness, there's this 85-inch for $300.
Because it's not the one I want.
Yeah. Do I know how are the reviews, all of that stuff. So.
Yeah, I'm that way too. I don't like the big crowds. So like if we go out, we'll go out like later in the day when it calms down, because there are some like small things that we like to get. And obviously now most deals are all online in addition to being in stores. So I love buying stuff.
Well, and that's so common, and that's why we're talking about this today. So this podcast is based off of a ridiculous conversation that my family had about Christmas.
Okay.
Right? So, and again, we want to bless our children. We want to get them nice things and all that stuff. And now we're starting to have adult children.
Right.
So now the dynamics have changed. So now it's more of like, how can we get our adult children something that they need?
Right.
Right. Which is changed dramatically. So we have teenage girls that still live with us who are all about things that they want. Right. And we have adult children who now the gifts are all about things that they need. So
a washer and dryer,
carpet, right? So my daughter Kaylee wants carpet in her living room. We're like, that's almost as bad as underwear, but okay, sure. We'll get you carpet for your living room. And the previous year I think we got them like an appliance for their kitchen or something like that.
Right.
So we told our girls, our teenage girls, that one present, like that was it. This year we're doing one present. I'm not saying that it's like, they're not going to get underwear, but it's one present, right?
Sure.
And, I've been doing a lot of, especially as we're talking about the podcast, about, being healthy and all of the different ideals and values that we have.
Right.
One of the things that we did several years ago was we actually, instead of doing presents, we went to Disney. Right.
Okay.
And I've been reading a lot about.
A lot of people do that.
Yeah. And it was a fantastic experience.
You have a shared experience instead of.
And so, I've been reading a lot about having a healthy relationship with your money. And one of the things that I read that really resonated with me was to spend your money on experiences, not on things.
Right.
Right. So, we were talking about, what type of experiences could we have? And again, Disney is something that, like, I can't remember what 2 years ago I bought any of my kids or what that I received from them. Yeah. No offense. If my children are listening to this, I cannot remember what you got me 2 or 3 years ago. I'm sorry. But, I do remember going to Disney with them, and I remember all of the experiences, and that was years and years and years ago.
Right.
We had another one where a couple years ago we went to, where Cook's Forest is? Yeah. So the day after Christmas, we went up there, and again, this is part of the present. We went up and got a cabin, and there was like no TV, it was literally just a cabin in the woods, tons of snow, and it was just a great family experience.
Yeah.
But we limited the presents that year.
Yeah.
To be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's kind of, we kind of got onto this, and my wife and children love Black Friday, and I hate it with a passion. So again, all of this is like, so today's podcast is you don't need more stuff. That's what we're going to talk about today.
Right. And I'm not sure we're the experts on this topic.
I'm not either.
Because despite your love for shared experiences that you just described, you and I both love stuff.
We do. And so part of this, part of the podcast a lot of times when we're talking about stuff, I'm also internalizing the things that we're talking about.
Right.
So it's not necessarily just about like, oh, here's Ed and Joe, they know everything. Like, no, we're on this journey right with everybody else. And I need help with this.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to see what I'm going to learn today because like I've always lived my life based on this premise that money can't buy love, but money can buy stuff, and I love stuff, and so it just works for me. I just buy all this stuff, and I love it.
Yes, it can buy you a jet ski, and you've never seen somebody miserable on a jet ski. Right?
Exactly. I love that quote. Now, for me, as far as my relationship with my money, I think I'm really good as far as budgeting. I'm really good as far as making sure that I'm spending wisely. As far as my savings, I feel like I'm very advanced for my age as far as where my savings are going and how much I'm doing.
Yeah, we just talked about that the other day. You have a serious retirement plan.
Right. And so with that in place, it actually puts my wife and I in a position where on our day-to-day expenses, it really is limiting. It feels like we're almost living paycheck to paycheck, but we do that on purpose because so much is going into our savings accounts. So it's not that we don't have extra money. It's just intentionally going to these other places. It forces us to live really way below where we probably could have if we weren't saving, just spending frivolously right now. But within that margin of the money that I do allow myself to spend, I'm always finding ways where I can not buy new clothes. We were just talking about this,
right.
Not buy new clothes so I can buy the new iPhone. And I'm looking for small ways to save money in some places so that I can spend money in large things because I do really love stuff. So I struggle with this area. And now you might say that's not struggling because you say, okay, I'm saving or whatever. But there is something about like these large products, Apple products, smart home products, things that I just love technology. I love being on the cutting edge. And so I'm always trying to get more stuff. With that said, I need to learn that I don't need more stuff in my life.
Yeah, and so again, this will be a fun journey together through the next 20-some minutes here.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
I was doing some research on this, and there's this effect. It's called the Diderot effect. I had never heard of this before.
Okay.
All right, and it was coined by this guy with the last name Diderot, and he was a writer in the 1700s, and he did a lot of stuff with the French encyclopedia and things like that. But he was a really, a very, very humble man. He, again, he was a writer back then where you just didn't make a lot of money.
Right.
So he wrote about this instance where he was gifted a scarlet dressing gown, right? And so again, in the 1700s, scarlet, purple was extremely expensive, to be able to do that dye and things like that. So he gets this scarlet dressing gown, as a gift. And what he found was the other things in his life no longer compared to that dressing gown, right?
Okay.
So you have this, and again, this is back in the time where there was this huge divide between the haves and the have-nots, right?
Okay.
You had like royalty that could afford things like that, and you had everyone else. So there weren't things like what we have where you have wants. These were all needs, right?
Yes.
You need a dressing gown. It's what kept you warm, you know what I mean, in between wearing your clothes and not wearing your clothes, kind of thing, right?
Right.
And but when he got this dressing gown, suddenly his office, where he was working, his dressing gown seemed out of place there. So he started replacing other things in his life to keep up with this thing that he had.
Right.
So he replaced his desk. He had like this well-worn desk that he loved, but he replaced it because he couldn't be sitting there in his beautiful dressing gown and sitting at this, desk, and that, this old worn desk. And then he had a chair that was made from straw. It was like straw stuffed chair, and he had it replaced with one that was covered in Moroccan leather. And so it was really interesting.
This is my life right now.
Did you feel like this? Right? And so what
I've heard the name, but I wasn't familiar with the concept. And it's just that idea that once you maybe upgrade one area, it gives you some sort of feeling that you need to keep. It's almost keeping up with the Joneses, but in your own spirit.
In your own, yes. And
yeah.
And he ends up in this crushing debt, all because he had gotten this one luxurious thing.
Wow.
Right? And it's kind of funny. I love this. I love this quote. And this is in his writing. He said, "I was an absolute master of my old dressing gown, but I became a slave to my new one."
Wow.
That's really deep.
That is.
You know what I mean?
And that's the majority of our society right now, where people are experts at spending money they don't have and making sure that they position themselves to get more credit cards or take out more loans or whatever, just so that they can continue to buy the things they don't really need in order to give themselves that feeling of purpose or accomplishment, or that, I'm important or something.
Well, yeah, and it even goes a little bit further, because it's really about the introduction of a new possession, right? It results in a process of spiraling consumption. So essentially, the purchase of one new item leads to the purchase of another one.
Right.
So you get a new car, right? And suddenly you need new floor mats for that car.
Absolutely.
Right? You need new floor mats. And then you're like, man, I need some, I'm going to show my age here, but you need some underglow, right? Now you need...
Underglow is not a thing. You wrap your car now. That's the thing.
Yes,
you got to wrap it.
Now you got to wrap it. Now you got to get your I have tinted windows on my car,
you
right?
Get tinted windows.
Now you're taking it to the car wash. So the introduction of a purchase of something new actually creates this domino effect of more purchases.
Yeah.
And now you're like, oh, well, I got a new car. Now my wife wants a new car.
Yeah.
Now we get a new car, know.
We're in that right now. We just redid our kitchen, which we planned for and budgeted for and, had a long plan in order to get there. But now it's completely redesigned our house. So now we got to get new furniture for the living room because of the way our house is laid out. And our one room doesn't have as much light in it because we moved some walls around. So now we got to change a ceiling fan because I need an LED light in my ceiling fan. And all of these trickle effects are now happening in my home. And I don't have the money to do it right now. Some people might go out and make those purchases right now.
Well, especially on credit, easy monthly payments, right?
Exactly.
And again, we did the same thing. We got new countertops. This is years and years ago. But suddenly those countertops made our old appliances look bad.
Yep.
Right. And so now it's like, oh, now we need stainless.
Yep.
And it's this ridiculous cycle that we end up in the middle of.
Right.
It's painful
and it's dangerous.
It's very, very dangerous
because you can end up you end up in a place. Obviously, you can end up. The goal of this isn't necessarily to talk about financial aspects of it. You can end up in a bad place financially, but just like the Diderot effect, you end up in a place where your soul isn't in the right position because you're constantly feeling like I need more or I need something else, and the truth is you really don't.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about keeping up with the Joneses yet, right? This is just you internally.
Yourself, yes. Wow.
Yeah, and so think about that. Like you're not trying to keep up with your neighbors. You're not trying to show off on Facebook yet.
Right.
We haven't even got to that part
right.
yet. Now we're just at the, what does this do to you mentally that causes you to continue to overspend and desire more?
This might need to be a series, this topic. We might need to do
really
a 4-part series on this. Yeah, I mean, the keeping up with the Joneses effect, just the idea that, you see somebody else that has something, you want that thing too. Or you might not want that exact thing, but you want to keep pace with them as far as the type of money you're spending to match their spending. They might have a certain class of car, so you have to have that certain class of car. And there's just this feeling that, okay, if I'm not matching them, if I'm not having the same as them, I'm not as successful as them. And then you feel worse about yourself. You feel bad about yourself. And yeah, you end up in a place that you really don't want to be.
So it was interesting trying to understand this and understand why I do the things that I do. Again,
Yep.
Apple products, right? I get the new Apple products. It just is what it is. I don't know why, but it really appeals to me.
Yeah.
So there's physical things that happen to you when you buy stuff.
Yeah.
So there's this chemical called dopamine, right?
Right.
And I'm sure you've heard about this.
Yep.
This is like the runner's high.
Right.
This is the way that a lot of drugs work in your system, right?
Right.
That it makes you release dopamine and it makes you feel good. It makes you feel good for a certain amount of time as the dopamine's surging through your system.
Yeah.
So I did some research on this because I'm not an expert at this, so I wanted to know more.
Right.
So there's MRI studies of the brain that actually suggest that the increase of dopamine levels are linked more to the anticipation of the experience of buying something than the actual experience of buying it. So what that means is that as you are thinking about and planning for, I was going to say Good Friday. It's not Black Friday. For Black Friday coming up, your body's actually already starting to release that dopamine and those endorphins as you're getting excited about going shopping.
Yeah, I've experienced
that. Isn't that crazy?
I love doing, you mentioned this earlier, I love doing the research. And part of the research is the research is the fun for me. And then actually buying the product, then I end up just moving on. Like I'm glad I have it for maybe the first day or two, but then I move on to whatever the next thing is that I want to research and figure out that I want to buy next.
Yeah, so you're actually getting the effect of that going into it. But the so then going on, right?
Yeah.
During a sale, all right? So as you're there on Black Friday during the sale, your body's automatic nervous system, right? So that's what triggers the fight or flight,
okay.
Right? It takes control of some organs. Again, this is all proven out. This is as you're shopping. This isn't as you're facing a lion out in the tundra,
okay.
Right? As you're going and going sale shopping on Black Friday, right? The same fight or flight thing happens, right? And your body starts acting as if you are in that type of situation, right?
Wow.
So
that's what causes people to punch people on Black
Friday.
Exactly,
it does, right?
This makes sense.
So you have a heightened response, similar to when you're encountering predators, right?
Right.
And what that does is it makes it almost impossible to control your impulses when you want to buy. So your brain switches into competition mode, right? And suddenly that TV that you went by and it's an 85-inch for $300, you don't need it. You probably didn't even want it, but you don't want somebody else to have it.
Right.
And you don't want to miss out on the opportunity.
Right. So it can be a little bit of a snowball effect on a day like Black Friday, where I've experienced even this reality maybe on a normal day of shopping too, but on Black Friday specifically, maybe you're going out for one specific deal and you see that other deal. It causes something in you to, like you just said, and there can be a snowball effect over the entire day. You're walking through all these stores, you're seeing all these tags and sales. You probably already looked through the book before you even went to the store, but now that you're there in person, it's right in front of you and you see the sale, you don't need it. There's no reason for you to even have it, but you end up doing it because of this, whatever's being released in your system.
Yeah. You're like, a food dehydrator? I need 2 of those. I never thought about dehydrating food before, but they're $39. I need one of those. And Aunt Susie needs one too, apparently. I needed a gift for her anyway.
I need one in my house and in my car. Dehydrate my fast food when I don't finish it.
So there's this thing called, it's the aversion theory, right?
Okay.
Which essentially means that your desire to want something is actually less powerful than your desire to not miss out on that thing. It's actually twice as much. So again, we'll use Apple products because that's something, right?
Right.
So my desire to want the new iPhone isn't as powerful as my desire as to miss out on it.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, yeah. So that happens to me with the release of every new Apple product. I don't want to miss out on even this current wave, and the fact that they're refreshing every year all of their products. I find myself wanting every iteration of this product. I don't want to miss out on a gap of time where I don't have the best of what they're offering.
And again, you look at it and you go, what is that thing on that new iPhone that I desperately need that makes it that this one is no longer good?
Right.
Typically nothing.
Nothing.
Right?
Yeah.
But I don't want to miss out.
Right.
So that aversion theory, or that aversion theory is why Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Amazon days,
Prime days,
the Prime days, it's really manipulating us by triggering these basic human responses.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So obviously we've dug into all of the why behind why I am the way that I am. How do I solve it?
Well, so
help me here today, Joe. Help our listeners.
Well, first of all, I do want to point out that very similar to alcohol and drugs, that once the dopamine leaves your body, you actually feel guilt, and very similar to when a drug addict, indulges in that addiction.
Wow.
Afterwards, you feel that same remorse, that guilt, but you immediately start, as soon as you start feeling that, you start craving the next high. You create that next shot of dopamine, the next shot of endorphin. So, shopping in a lot of ways is just as addictive. And again, I know that there's huge differences between, physical addiction and something like this.
Sure.
But it doesn't make it any less real to the person that's going through it.
Absolutely.
So, so again, I think the first thing is to be aware that it is happening. I think that's the first thing you have to do. Like,
sure.
Realize that you are not craving what you're actually buying.
Yeah.
That you're trying to purchase a feeling, not necessarily a thing.
Yeah, because that's good, because I think there could be people listening that, in essence, don't even realize that this is happening to them. They really do believe they need this next thing,
right?
And they're so trapped in the cycle. They're so trapped in the Diderot effect that they can't even think about what's happening to them in their bodies, or about how they're spending their money or whatever.
Right. And so I think that, again, just acknowledging that it's happening
is
a really, really good first step.
All right, I've done that one.
You're done. Check. All right. So the second is to analyze and predict the full cost of future purchases. So again, this is where you're starting to get into, all right, so I buy a new TV, right? That's great. What else is that TV going to cost you? Well, now I need a mount for behind it, right?
The surround sound system.
I need the surround sound system.
Right.
Maybe that even turns into, now I have this beautiful TV up on the wall. Now I need a recliner. I need
my Philips Hue light strip that will be on the back of it to cause a incandescent glow.
So I think sometimes the exercise of going through and what are the associated costs and really, really digging into them will also help to break that cycle a little bit. Yes, it's not the $300 flat screen. It's the $1,000 of other ancillary things that are going to go along with it that you have to be aware of.
I really believe that is a practice that I don't know if I ever saw somebody demonstrate that for me, like in my life. I had to learn how to do that on my own. And even to some extent, I guess now we're talking about it out loud, so people might think, oh yeah, like I've done that before. I've never done that. But I think this is such a practical step to helping you be in the place you ultimately want to be, and not just stumble into a pattern of spending money you don't have. But it's a really good tip to think that through, and to know that there are people in your life that they are in the place they are financially. They're in the place in their life because they do actually have the capability of thinking through the full consequences of a purchase.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we try to do it, with vacations and things like that, where you go, okay, so the beach house that you're going to is this much money, but what's vacation actually going to cost you?
Right.
So because,
travel.
Yeah, because more than likely it's 2 or 3 times what the quote unquote price of vacation is.
Exactly. A trip to Disney is not just the ticket you're spending. It's going to be the money that you spend on food while you're in the park, everything else associated with it.
Yeah, the mouse ears. You're getting some mouse ears.
You got to get mouse ears.
So here's the third one. And this is, again, this is like really black and white, but avoid unnecessary new purchases. Again, I know that's like, but
that's good. Have you ever heard the trick of just like basically sleep on it? Like if you really want something today, just go to sleep. And if you're thinking about it tomorrow, you can revisit the idea of making the purchase then. But a lot of times, again, because the dopamine release is in the exploring and the research of the actual product, just go to sleep on it, and you might wake up and you have gotten the rush out of your system, and you might realize you don't actually need that product.
Yeah, and one thing that again, my wife and I don't do this, but I had heard this before, was especially any major purchase over a certain amount, whatever you and your family, your spouse, $50.
Yeah.
Anything over $50, it simply needs approval. I know that sounds really weird,
that's
right?
Good. Yeah.
But you're like, hey, look, if it's going to be more than this amount, my wife and I need to agree on that.
Yeah. Wow.
My wife would love that and hate it at the same time.
I just had a conversation with a couple recently who were really struggling in their area of finances. And the husband was taking way too much control over the finances, and he would give his wife basically an allowance. He wouldn't let her into the bank accounts, but he would get some like bonuses and things at work, and he wouldn't put those into the bank account, and he would spend those as much as he wanted. And so they ended up in this really unhealthy financial situation. And one of the things we said, in addition to both having access to the bank accounts and things like that, is to come to an agreement around large purchases.
Yeah, and again, it sounds like that guy needs to listen to the podcast, this podcast, and then the other ones where my wife comes in with all of her wisdom, but on how to be a good husband.
Yeah.
And
they're on the right path. They're good.
But I think that's a really good. Again, any major purchases, and again, what that means something different to every family. To some family that could be $1,000,
right?
To some that could be $20,
right? Yeah, it just depends on where you're at.
Yeah. The next tip is remind yourself that possessions do not define you. And that is, now we're talking about keeping up with the Joneses, right? That the car that I drive is not who I am. The house that I live in does not somehow, define my social, well-being within, my neighborhood.
Yeah. And I struggle to empathize with this a little bit because I really don't feel like I struggle with this. The majority of my struggle related to wanting more stuff really is the rush of dopamine that comes with the research and the actual acquisition.
I agree. That's the same as me.
So I'm not totally find myself in comparison with other people, but I know I've talked to a lot of other people who do struggle with this. And it's this constant comparison game of their life versus somebody else's, whether they're looking at it on social media or actually engaging with this person in an everyday. But now you have these Instagram influencers who are literally trying to take advantage of people struggling with this.
Right.
That's the whole point of influencing on social media, is that someone's going to see that person with it and think, oh, I need that thing too. And so to me, that kind of relates to our first point, is understand you struggle with that and be able to identify that in yourself. And maybe you take certain action steps to avoid that. You unfollow these Instagram influencers. You might like them. You might be jiving with their YouTube vlogging or whatever they're doing, but just unfollow them and start to get rid of these trigger points for you that might cause you to have that effect.
Yeah. And I know for me, there's two things. There's certain blogs technology blogs that I subscribe to, that I read, and they'll describe some new product, and I'm like, oh, I need that.
Right.
And then that coupled with the instant access to buying stuff, Amazon Prime is
yep.
It's just so easy to overspend and spend money on things that are not useful.
Yep.
It might just be one of those things where you have to eliminate those things from your life, to be able to get it under control.
And this is a little deeper, but you have to find out, where does my identity actually come from?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to come from, your family, your friends, your faith, whatever you have going on in your life that really actually is the thing that defines you. Gives you worth.
So I have two more. This is the last one that's actually on the list, and then I have one that is I think is really the key. Buy things for their usefulness rather than their status. So
I don't like that one.
I know that one's tough.
Yeah.
We can all make fun of the old guy that has the second generation iPhone, but the fact of the matter is it works for him just as good as a new one would.
Yep.
And when I say we all, I mean you and I.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's good. I think for me that would play a bigger role if I was making a large purchase. If I'm looking at a car, do I really need this brand of car with this bells and whistles? I mean, right now I drive a Ford,
Yep.
Built Ford tough. So I want to make wise decisions around money related to the usefulness for sure.
Yeah. And then this is my last tip. And I actually really, really like this one. And this is so easy. You just have to do it.
Okay.
When tempted with a purchase decision, tell yourself, I have enough.
Right.
And physically say it,
right.
I have enough.
Right.
Like when you're looking at the TV and you go, man, I only have a 55 inch at home. This one's a 75 inch. Physically say out loud, I have enough.
Yep.
And keep telling yourself that over and over again.
Yep.
And it actually does work. I've again, since researching this, I've done this a couple times, and there's been a couple purchases that I have not made because I simply said this to myself.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the dopamine effect that comes with the research, because there also are so many studies related to your ability to express gratitude in your life and be thankful for what you already have. And truly, there's studies with gratitude that are associated with greater life satisfaction, lower levels of psychological distress, increased physical health. You can actually, if you express gratitude, it also releases dopamine and serotonin into your body. Serotonin is like an antidepressant. It just literally makes you happier. Dopamine, everything we've talked about, those things actually get released in your system just by expressing gratitude. So the same thing that happens within researching something new can also happen to your body by being thankful for what you already have. But you have to practice that. You have to practice what that looks like.
And this is kind of how we can wrap it up, because we are talking about this is, this podcast is going to be going out on Thanksgiving week, which is also Black Friday week. And that is key.
Right.
Is being thankful for what you have.
Right.
Even in the United States, the vast majority of us have more than most people in the world.
Yep. And
to look at your old car from 5 years ago and say, man, I'm thankful for that, instead of going, man, I can't believe that this thing has 50,000 miles. I need to trade it in.
Yeah.
Is really important. It's important not just for our finances and our health there. It's also important for our mental and emotional
well-being. Yeah. And it's so, we've talked about this in the past, but your ability to be critical about situations or your own life or circumstances is so easy. It's easy to be critical. So it takes a little bit of intentionality to be positive in situations and to actually be thankful. So I think you can literally practice choosing to be thankful when reading about the studies on gratitude. It talks about how your neurons fire in your brain. And if you're constantly critical, you're carving out these neuron paths in your brain. You actually have to redefine these new paths of the way you think. And if you practice gratitude over and over and over again, it will become easier to do it the more that you practice it.
So I think that's all the time that we have here. I just want to remind you that you are meant to live an extraordinary life. Everybody that's listening, you are meant to live an extraordinary life, and you are also meant to have great relationships with your stuff and your money. So don't cheapen it. You don't need more stuff. So this Black Friday, go out, enjoy the lines if that's your thing, but just watch what you spend and why you spend it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Share this with somebody. Subscribe. You can check us out at joealtieri.com/podcast or daretobedifferentpodcast.com. Ed, thanks so much for coming, man. I love this. I love you being my co-host. It's amazing.
It's great.
Thanks a lot.